Hard.
Okay, we are going live in just a few seconds here. Okay, we are live on YouTube. Okay, so the time is 12:05 p.m. on June 10th, 2020. And for today, at least, I will call this meeting to order. This is the first meeting of the recently established Grand County Economic Development Advisory Board. Thank you all for coming. I think we do have most folks here with us today. I don't see anyone waiting in the Zoom waiting room. And so let's go ahead and get going. Did everyone get a copy of the meeting packet that I sent out via email and also attached to the calendar invite?
Yes.
So,
Great.
Zachariah, I'm still having a problem with attachments on my county email. I'm trying to get logged into just G Suite to see if it'll show up in there. If it's attached to the calendar invite, let me see that. But I don't have that pulled up. I'm having a hard time.
Okay, let's see here. I had to sign out of my county stuff in order to get in for the council address. Would someone mind sending Curtis the meeting packet via email?
Hey, Zachariah.
Yeah, I'll send it right now.
I'm sorry, Rob, what were you saying?
Caitlin texted me. She's in the waiting room. She says you have to let her in.
Okay, let's see. I don't see her in the waiting room.
Maybe she's in. Maybe I'll tell her to check her link.
Yeah, tell her to try it again. I just actually disabled the waiting room. We don't really need it for today. So have her try it again. And then if that doesn't work, she can reach out to me via text. And I'll see what I can do. Okay. So let's go ahead and start with introductions. And I think that you all are already aware of why you are here today and what this group is about, at least in part. And so that will become more self-evident as we get into our conversation. So I won't have an extensive welcome. Let's just go ahead and do quick introductions. I would guess that most people know each other, but not everyone. So I know that it's, sometimes gets tiring doing this when you're in the same meetings with the same people so often, but let's go ahead anyways. So Zachariah Levine, I am the Community and Economic Development Director for Grand County. And I will call on folks just to keep this efficient. So Liana, will you introduce yourself?
Yes, sorry. I'm Leanna Etchberger, and I am the Associate Vice President of the USU Moab campus here in Moab.
And Curtis Wells.
My name is Curtis Wells, and I am here as a representative from the Grand County Council.
And Brad Bertosh.
Yes, I'm a part-time resident in Moab, have been for the last about 20 years. Been coming down for a lot longer than that, and recently retired from venturecapital.org, which was a or which is a venture accelerator that's one of the first in the country and one of the most successful.
Great, thank you. And Mayor Newhouse?
My name is Emily Niehaus, Mayor of Moab, and I am representing the city of Moab.
Thank you. Andy Lane?
Lynn Gisler, the Executive Director of the Moab Area Travel Council for Grand County.
And Rob Walker?
I am a full-time resident of Moab for the last year and a half, and my background is in the investment management world. I worked in New York City and Boston before coming here, and yeah, I've sort of retired early to Moab and just been getting involved with local stuff. I'm on a few boards, and I provide financial advice and consulting to nonprofits and things like that.
Great, thanks, Rob. And Sheik?
Sheik Khan, a citizen and a business owner in Moab, Utah.
John?
Sorry, my internet connection's slow. I think you said me, Zachariah. John Knight, part owner in Arches Vacation Rentals and utility scale renewable energy developer.
And Lacey?
I'm Lacey Shumway. I'm the Executive Director of the Moab Area Chamber of Commerce.
Thanks. And lastly, Kelly?
I'm Kelly Thornton. I'm the Southeast Service Area Manager for the Department of Workforce Services.
Great. And we do have one more member of this group who's not with us. Hopefully she's not having technical difficulties either, because she did indicate that she planned to come. And that is Jasmine Duncan, who is the mayor of Castle Valley. She also works for Sellers Group, which is a property management company. They manage the Cinema Court property and may have some others as well. But Jasmine, as the representative for the town of Castle Valley, is also on this committee. So I will check my email and text messages to make sure that she's not having any trouble either. As this is a newly,
Sorry,
Okay.
Jasmine did send an email that said she would be able to make it just
Oh,
like
okay.
10 minutes before this.
okay, thanks. As many of you, I was on back-to-back calls ahead of this meeting. So thanks for that, Lacey. As a newly established board for Grand County, and as we are all first appointees to this board, I think the first order of business is to appoint officers, or elect officers. So, I'm going to suggest that we establish a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary that can help with minutes and organization as needed. And I don't have any particular process for how we can do this. I think it can be probably just a straw poll vote by a show of hands. And I'll just note that I am more than happy to serve as the chair and keep this group organized and moving forward if that makes sense to folks as a staff person. But by no means do I feel like I have to be the one. And so I guess I'll just kind of open it up to the floor. If there's anyone that's really interested in serving in that role, by all means, please make it known.
I never really understood the point of the chair and the vice chair and all these different things. I mean, I guess that you don't vote, right, if you're the chairman, and then you kind of like break ties and you kind of like lead the meeting in terms of, keeping it flowing. I would say, I mean, I would kind of put a motion to just have you be chairman, because, this is your department and everyone's used to you lead meetings all the time. So, my 2 cents. Any
Okay.
seconds? Anyone second? Okay, all in favor of voting for Zachariah as chair, say aye.
Okay.
Aye.
It's easy peasy. Great. So I think the vice chair is just important to have in the event that I cannot attend a meeting. I don't anticipate that will happen often because most of the meetings will probably be scheduled, at least in large part around my availability. Of course, all of your availabilities as well, but just so that that I can have some backup in the event that, you know, an emergency pops up, you know, a few days before a meeting. Is anyone willing to serve as the vice chair, or to make a motion recommending somebody else as the vice chair?
Well, actually, I would like to just put forward the idea that it's not individuals, but positions that we set as chair and vice chair. So your position, Zachariah, could serve as chair, and then perhaps your council member, since it's seated in the county, the vice chair should be, in my opinion, the member of the council that sits on the committee. That's what I would recommend. And I have no interest in serving as the secretary.
I think so. That is a reasonable approach, and I'll just note that several of the positions on this board are indeed, you know, placeholders for agency representatives. So, you know, someday, whenever that might be, there will be a different mayor. Someday there will be a different travel council director, or a different representative from USU. So that is true for those of us representing agencies. But I think that's a reasonable approach as well. Mayor Niehaus.
I second the proposal so let's.
Okay, so we have a motion by Emily Niehaus, seconded by Rob Walker, to have the county council representative, whomever that may be at any given time, serve as the vice chair of this board. Is there any additional discussion about that?
Well, I guess the only discussion I would add would just be that, you know, would there be any chance that because it's a rotating seat, that it might be harder the ball might get dropped in terms of, like, if you need someone to take over like the day before or something like that, and no one's quite like invested in, I'm going there every time. I don't know. That's just a thought, but I think it makes a lot of sense to keep it there. So I guess the question would just be, like, to Curtis, whether, like, is it going to be really easy, you think, to always have someone from the council to attend?
Yeah, I don't think that's a problem.
Okay.
Okay, if there isn't any additional discussion, I'd entertain a vote. Okay, I see some thumbs up. Is that a unanimous? Anybody opposed? That might be easier. Okay, great. Okay, now the big question is, it would be great to have somebody who is willing to take minutes, and that is because, as many of you know, it's very difficult to facilitate a meeting while you're also trying to take minutes for the meeting. And I find that it is definitely easiest if minutes are taken during the meeting, so you don't have to spend a bunch of time afterwards going back through recordings. And then, you know, it shouldn't take you any additional time than just participating anyways. So is there anyone who will bravely step up to help us keep track of what we discuss in our meetings by taking minutes as the secretary?
Hey, Zachariah, can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
if there are certain requirements that governments demand in their minutes that may be different than what businesses demand in theirs, I would suggest that we have a county representative that is comfortable and has done and knows how to take those kinds of minutes. Would probably be a better way to go than maybe a business guy, because we take minutes very differently, I think, than government does.
I would disagree. There's no strict legal standard within state code. You know, the idea is just so that if someone is looking at a record of the meeting, they can get a gist of what was discussed. We also have audio and video recordings. So, you know, in modern times, the standard for written record is probably even lower than it was even just a few years ago. So, so I don't have any concerns about that personally.
Zachariah, did you want only one person from the city? I see that Caitlin and I are both here. I'm assuming that we're serving sort of different roles, but if you only wanted one person from the city, can you clarify that? Sorry, this is not about minutes unless
Sure.
if you want us both, then Caitlin's a pretty good minute taker.
Oh, don't do that. You can't do that.
I did that. I did that right.
So that's a great question. You know, this is an open meeting to the public, so anyone can participate in, or at least attend these. I have made the Zoom meeting open because I don't anticipate that these are going to become large meetings with, you know, many members of the public. So that's point number one. Point number two is that Caitlin and I have been working together on economic development activities for several years now. And even in her role at the city of Moab, she's still participated in several ongoing economic activities. So I invited Caitlin as well as others who have been participating in a group that's sort of tracking in parallel to this as a subunit of the coronavirus task force. We call that group the Economic Resilience Task Force. It's kind of within the coronavirus task force umbrella. And at some point, I do see the conversations being so overlapping that it just makes sense to invite folks that are in that group but not officially appointed to this one to participate as what you might call ex officio members. Now, that's not identified in our bylaws, but you know, whatever technical term we give those folks, I think it's very appropriate to include you know, a potentially wider you know, body of people in our conversations as the formal advisory group. You're on mute.
Sorry. So you want to keep us both?
Yeah, to the degree that you are both, you know, able and willing to participate, great. If there comes a point when you want to, when the city of Moab wants to appoint Caitlin as its representative, that's your prerogative. But I'm, you know, always going to invite Caitlin to participate should she be able and willing.
Great. Okay.
Zachariah, if you only anticipate the meetings are going to be like every other month or something like that?
Yeah, I'm thinking like 6 to 8 times a year, probably.
Okay. And if you don't have a high standard for the minutes, I'm happy to take minutes and just, you know, like right now, I probably would have just recorded introductions.
Done. Is there a motion on the? That
I'll make them all one page, always one page.
I move.
Okay, so
before I reconsider.
So for the minutes, Mr. Walker, the motion, let's say, is made by Curtis Wells and seconded by Brad Burtosh. Any additional discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Okay, let's call that unanimous. So great. So we've got our chair, I'll serve in that position, our vice chair, Curtis Wells, and our secretary, Rob Walker. In keeping with the Open Meetings Act and the spirit of advisory bodies for the county council, do we have any conflicts of interest or disclosures that we need to make? And I'll specify here, I can get you all probably a cheat sheet on this from our county attorney, but you really only need to disclose something that that would be a conflict of interest for an action item that is in front of us. And so today I'm just going to skip over this quickly. I don't think any of us need to make conflict of interest statements unless you feel really compelled to do so. You are all members of the business community in one form or another. And so I suspect that, you know, we'd have a laundry list of things to disclose if we were just all disclosing our business interests. So I will circle back with the county attorney on this matter and just make sure that we are covering all of our bases for future meetings. We don't have any other action items for today anyways, so.
Zachariah, just on that,
Sure.
I think it makes more sense to disclose conflicts when we're discussing a proposed allocation of resources.
Correct. Yeah, and there may be some other instances as well, but as I said, we don't have anything today that folks need to worry about.
Yeah, I think if anyone, I mean, I don't know if it's in the bylaws or whatever, but I would just think intuitively that if we're talking about giving money to something, and if anyone has any loose affiliation with benefiting from that, like it's their, even if it's like their good friend or something, they should just kind of abstain from those votes.
Well, there's clear policy on that and how individuals need to handle that as being members of an advisory body. So I'll tell you what, at our next meeting, I will invite the county attorney to clarify that for everyone. It's probably you know, pretty obvious to our elected officials already because they have to do it in their normal conduct as elected officials, but it's probably not so obvious to everyone else. So let's go ahead and move forward today. Caitlin is our only non-board member. Caitlin, do you have anything that you want to say as a citizen to be heard?
I do not, just listening in.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we don't have any approvals of minutes because this is our first meeting. So let's go ahead and get into the review of Senate Bill 95 and the role of our board. So Senate Bill 95, I've included this information in your packet, but Senate Bill 95 was approved in the 2020 legislative session, and it reformulated the mix of rural economic development incentive programs at the state. So in the past, there was roughly 10 or 11, a set of 10 or 11 incentive programs, many of which did not work very well for rural communities. And so for the last couple of years, there's been a big push to eliminate programs that have not worked well and consolidate to the degree possible some of the programs that have been working. And so out of that conversation grew SB 95 and this board and the Rural County Grant Program. So basically, a lot of this of the governor's office of economic development's programs are now combined into what is called the Rural County Grant Program. And a precursor or a prerequisite for being able to receive funds through the Rural County Grant Program is the establishment of this board. So the county has checked off that box. We've got an economic development advisory board. It meets the state's standards for who needs to serve on it. And so now we can proceed to applying for funds in this rural county grant program. So here's how it works. There are two pots of money. Pot A enables Grand County to apply for up to $200,000 in funding for economic development. As a county of the 5th class, we pretty much have like guaranteed access up to that $200,000 mark. We don't have to apply for that much, but I don't know why we wouldn't. Pot B is a pool of money that is distributed on a competitive basis, and applications for money out of that pot are reviewed by the Governor's Rural Partnership Board. Mayor Niehaus, are you still serving on that board?
I am still serving on the board, and I'm sorry, I have a chicken that is like yelling at me. So it's better than an 11-year-old, but sorry, when I unmute myself, you will hear this ridiculous girl. But yes, I still serve on that board, and what you're saying is correct.
Okay, great.
On the
So
FBA.
in Pot B, the county can apply for up to $600,000.
Zachariah,
Yep,
I have a question about Pot A.
yep.
It relates also to Pot B. When I read through the documentation, it didn't seem to me that a match was required for the first 200,000, but the match is required for the up to 600,000. Is that correct?
That is correct. However, it has been clearly communicated to me from GOED that while there isn't a match required for the Pot A money, the $200,000 this year, in subsequent funding years, GOED is expecting counties to provide a match at the threshold that's established for Pot B. So Pot B is an additional $600,000 competitive distribution, which means that you could get up to a maximum of $800,000 in any given year. Pot B, as we've said, does require a match for a county of our size. That's 20%. The rulemaking allows for in-kind contributions or staff time to serve as part of the match, but obviously the more hard cash you can put towards the match, the more competitive you will be. So, it's not advantageous to say, we're going to match 20% just in staff time that's coming out of, say, the county general fund. That match can come from various sources. It can come from the public sector, the private sector, and it's really just GOED wanting to see that the county, that the community is pitching in, if you will. I have been warned that the Pot B funding is subject to go away this year because of budget crises at every level of government. So, word on the street is that we proceed as if it is going to be available, but we need to be mindful that, it's a possibility it may not be available for anybody. So, that's the primary impetus for establishing this group. But as I've communicated to each of you and to the county council, this group is also, the formalization of conversations that I've been having with each of you and with some of you together over the last few years. And it's time that the community have a formal economic development advisory board. And so, my hope is that even beyond the rural county grant program, we collectively provide guidance and recommendations to our elected bodies on where to make investments for economic development and diversification efforts and programs and strategies. And then also for each of you to continue serving as what I would call economic ambassadors. Each of us has a network of contacts and professionals and a different worldview and different pulse on various aspects of the local and regional economy. And I think that there's real value in each of us serving as a liaison between those networks and this body. So any questions about this group or how we're going to operate, or about the state grant program?
On the state grant program, when is the application due, and what do we need to do to get that money? I mean, I get it. This is get the money that's out there, and Grant County plays a very, has been affected extraordinarily hard by what's gone on the last quarter. And so what do we need to do, and what advice do we need to give you? I get the ongoing. Hopefully we can give you advice. Hopefully we can be influential in getting additional monies to do additional programming that's important for Grant County. But what do we need to do now to get this rolling so you guys have some money to deal with?
So great questions. There is no hard deadline for the application. GOED has communicated that they set a soft deadline of June 19th for applications. It's very common for GOED to only release the application, just a week or two before they expect folks to submit them. And they only clarified, the rulemaking and how this was all going to work with the advisory boards within the last month or so. So they've set June 19th as a very soft deadline, and they've done that primarily because they want to just get the money out as quickly as possible. So the state is on a mid-year fiscal year. They can start distributing FY21 funds, beginning July 1st, and they anticipate, a couple of weeks to turn around applications. So the idea is just that, the sooner the better with respect to how quickly we can get the funds.
So what can we do to help you get that
So
in?
we need to decide. So basically we need to, as a group, start discussing, and we don't need to take actions on it today. I wanted to at least set a foundation for this group with today's meeting. But what we want to start doing is discuss what our priorities are. I don't think we have the luxury of time to discuss at too high of a level, like, all of our economic development and diversification ambitions, but maybe the ones that are most central to the next year. As you noted, there's going to be a mix of both recovery and evolution, I guess, or advancement, if you will. It probably in the next year and beyond. So that's something that's on the radar, but primarily, what are our priorities? What can we do with $200,000? And what types of projects would we want to at least put in the hopper so that the next meeting we can debate them and score them in a more rigorous fashion.
Zachariah, do we have to, when we apply, do we have to give specific projects, or we just say we're applying for a certain amount of money?
That's not entirely clear. I think the more specificity we can provide, the better. But one thing that I am certain of, and we've been very effective at getting money from GOED over the last couple of years, as soon as my department was formally tasked with economic development and took over what's called the Business Expansion and Retention Grant, or the BEAR grant, which is being replaced by this rural county grant program. We went from getting, roughly $5,000 or $10,000 in a given year to $85,000 last year. So we're on the right trajectory. But what I know GoEd likes is that they like to see buckets, right? So it's okay for us to say, hey, we're gonna request $50,000 for trainings and seminars, and here are the trainings and seminars we want to put out, but there's also room for identification of those as we get into the fiscal year. Here's $50,000 for a revolving loan fund. Here's $50,000 for direct consultation for businesses. So bringing in consultants, industry experts to work directly with individual businesses and so on. So you get the point in terms
Yeah, that makes sense.
buckets.
Do you think it makes sense for maybe you to start out and populate a list, and maybe either right now, and should we just like kind of add to something and then discuss them later, or what do you think we should do?
I think the easiest approach could be to go through what we've done in the past, and to give you, I can give you a sense of, a couple of the top priorities that I have in mind, probably 3 priorities that I have in mind. And then I would like to open it up to the group, because I think that there's a lot of wisdom in this group that I want to come to the forefront without getting too far down the rabbit hole of like, how many dollars in each pot and what we've done. So I'm just going to give you a very high level overview of what we've done in the past. And I included the last budget that we used in applying for BEAR funds for the current fiscal year. And this tracks pretty well with our office's activities as an economic development office, which is still very much getting its feet under itself. We've only been formally tasked with this work for a couple of years now. So Caitlin, if you're still with us, I would very much invite you to round out anything I say, because you've been working with us for this time, and Elaine and Liana and Lacey, you as well, please do jump in here. So in the past, we've split out our BEAR funding into these pots of workforce development, trainings and seminars, and then diversification efforts. The flagship, training and seminar program that we've been putting on for the last handful of years is the Moab Business Summit, now the Canyonlands Business Summit. And that, I think, has been growing in prominence and quality. We have also offered several industry specific or content specific trainings throughout the year. We try to do those about once a month. And we lean heavily on the chamber and the custom fit program at the Small Business Development Center to spread the word about that. We have put on workshops that are specific to kind of a larger economic development strategy, like workforce development. So trying to support locals in establishing remote work opportunities or telecommuting opportunities and giving them the skills to do that. We've put some money towards evaluating co-working space for the community, and you know, a few other things like that. So going forward, you know, the 3 or 4 sort of big ticket items for me, I think, are the business summit. I think that we should try to keep that going. 2021 might be challenging for us just given COVID. So, you know, I think that there's a distinct possibility that we, you know, have to take a break for 1 year before bringing everyone back together for a, you know, 200 or 300 person event. But you know, that's in the mix. A co-working space is definitely in the mix. My office has been working with Wabi Sabi as a potential partner to host that co-working space. In fact, we actually have designs from Set Engineering and Architectural Squared to expand their current facility to accommodate a co-working space. We applied for funding through the state's rural co-working grant, whatever it's called, but didn't get it. So that's still in the mix. Workforce development is still very much in the mix. And then lastly, we need a pot of money or a set of incentives that we can use to quickly and effectively support new businesses and entrepreneurs. So last year we established a group called the Grand Area Innovation Network. And the goal there is to support entrepreneurs and spur innovation within our economy. Mostly that's been a networking group so far, but the goal is to, you know, establish almost like a Shark Tank style pitch event. But, you know, we have new businesses or even small businesses that want to grow, reaching out to us all the time, looking for money. And, you know, I've thrown out the idea in the past of a revolving loan fund. But just in general, we need an effective tool for helping entrepreneurs here, because that is where we are going to see probably the most new business formation. It's from people who are already here, not companies that we're going out and attracting. But then the last category is, well, I don't know how much money this needs at this stage. It probably needs some, probably needs more boots on the ground than anything, but that's trying to pick off like the appropriate branch within a larger company that could establish some roots here. So while we're not going to have a Black Diamond or a Jeep manufacturing plant here, there's no reason why we couldn't have an R&D team or a design team or a section of the marketing team or something like that. So those are the broad categories of what I think are probably most opportune for us at the moment. And with that, I would just open it up to the group.
I got some thoughts here, Zachariah. So, one, just going back to the $200,000 application, like, it sounds like you thought that they might like to see the buckets that we would throw it into, but it may not be required. So if it's not required as part of the application process, I think we just throw it in there now, figure it out later. Like that's a kind of a no-brainer in my mind. Obviously we need to plan on how we're going to spend that money, but one thing that I think would be interesting, and I don't know exactly how we can utilize the funds, but is we have a ton of ideas in our community on how to diversify our economy and create economic development. We have a ton of ideas on what that means to be economically diverse. But I haven't seen like a set plan on how we get there. So I feel like before we're allocating funds to different buckets, which when you have whatever, call it 6 buckets for $200,000, it whittles down really quick to almost each subcategory not being effective because you don't have enough money can we allocate some funds to like just all of us sit down and figure out how are we going to, what do we want to be? How do we want to define our economic diversity, and then drive towards what, create a plan to make that happen. I know I have my ideas. I know probably everyone on the board has their own ideas on what that looks like.
So the short answer to your question is yes, some money can be set aside for planning. We don't want it to be too high of a percentage of our $200,000 allocation because, for better or worse, there's just a sentiment at many levels of government that, there's just too much planning and not enough action. And, I mean, the reality is that there's some truth to that, even though planning is always required, right? The world is changing rapidly and we always have to keep, reacting to that and also planning for it. So yes, we can have some money for planning. And then secondly, I would say, in response to your comment about, having too many pots and whittling down the amount of money in each one of those pots, I'm going to try to keep pushing our group. And I hope that you all help me because we're doing this together. But what I really want to do is continually, ask ourselves, what is the most important thing right now? We can't do 10 things well. It's hard to do 5 things well. Oftentimes it's hard to even do 2 things well. So let's pick, the most important, most impactful allocations for this money. And we'll get, additional opportunities in future years, of course. But let's try to keep as focused and centralized as possible.
Zachary, I think the priorities that you kind of outlined makes a lot of sense. I would ask that in this type of situation right now with COVID and getting out of post-COVID, is there specific priorities for the city and the county to look at from an economic development standpoint? And the first initial $200,000, how that can truly benefit job creation or business expansion right now? And I guess that's really a question for you guys within the municipality to really see what those priorities are and are there current opportunities that we can take advantage of with these dollars?
I would say something that everyone should be doing on the committee is make sure that you've read the draft Moab Area Economic Development Plan that is in the Community and Economic Development page on the county website, which is a plan that the county produced, through Zachariah's office approximately 2 years ago, in which we've had, kind of back to some of what John was saying as far as, and Zachariah alluded to this in the beginning, that the scope or the responsibilities of this committee can be expanded upon in that advisory board role, not just for this, the review and recommendation of grant opportunities. But I think a good assignment for the committee is to have everyone read that and at some point in the future in a meeting, kind of share notes as far as if we were to go in and update that and adopt that, what recommendations does the committee have and what alignment with either what's in the plan or what's not in the plan that needs to be in the plan should we be aware of as we're reviewing these applications and opportunities.
I will note that we have not conducted an extensive public engagement or planning process associated with that draft economic development plan. Caitlin Myers and I, with the help of JD McClanahan, who is a former AmeriCorps Vista of ours, really started working on that in response to the governor's 25,000 jobs initiative a couple years back. And we've been continually massaging it, but have not released an updated version of it that we were close to finalizing, several months ago, but never got there. So there's definitely a lot of room and even a lot of desire to have more input and involvement on that. But suffice it to say that the main thrust of our last round of revisions was to cut out a lot of the chafe, cut out a lot of extraneous information, narrow the focus, simplify it, shorten it, all in the spirit of getting to the core of what's essential. So, rather than it being a 60-page plan, let's get it down to like, it'll probably be closer to like 10 or 15 pages, but 1 or 2 pages of the most important action items.
On that note, Zachariah, would it be worthwhile to take a look at the action plan and the timelines that's already been established in that plan? Revisit maybe the short-term, mid-term action items, and then kind of maybe realign with what's currently happening with COVID?
I think that's a great exercise for this group to go through, and hopefully, we can do that while also being mindful of the application that we want to get submitted soon. And I don't want folks to feel pressured to like get this thing in by June 19th. I mean, frankly, that's not going to happen. I don't want it to get pushed out until October, but we've got a little bit of time to at least have our group gel and go through that exercise. So
I would suggest, go ahead.
I was just going to mention real quick, for those of you that weren't familiar with that process, it is worth mentioning that we have probably more than half of the advisory board that participated in that process to kind of lay a foundation for that plan and pitch that plan to the governor's office on this committee, including Leanna, Zachariah, myself, Mayor Niehaus, and John Knight. And so, we've got a good makeup on this committee of elected representatives and, volunteers, business people from the community that were involved in the ground floor of that process.
I've been through enough of these economic development plans, and I've done them. I've been a part of them. I've commented on them, created them, right? And I am concerned that oftentimes they end up on the shelf, and we need to be more proactive. I think that there are the Canyonlands Business Summit that I went to, Zachariah chaired in February, just before this COVID thing broke, was really terrific. I hope you all attended. They had some great discussions about sustainability, about what is not sustainable, and about looking at doing different things. And a number of things came out in my mind after getting some information about the Grand County and about this region from an economic development perspective. I think that we have to probably look at this from short-term and more intermediate term goals, and then maybe some long-term goals. But it's important that I think we should demonstrate that we're trying to do what we can to get things back to some degree of normalcy, but are planning so that in the future, in the near future, things change, and that the mix in Moab in terms of business changes. One of the big things that I was most impressed by was a study that the state of Utah had done on remote working. And the workforce advisory person that's here can probably get a copy of that and send it to Zachariah, probably has a copy of it, and send it out, because what it said to me is that some of the immediate things that could be done is government offices could be removed, people could be moved who want to go to rural areas, and because it seems to work. And I think there could be some recruiting done at the state level to get people here. I think in good paying jobs and could work remotely. I think we can do that with other large companies, especially in the tech space that I've been involved in for a long time. They're really looking at ways to put people out and manage them remotely. They do a lot of that now. And they would love to have great groups in rural communities. One of the things to make those things happen in the intermediate term run is we need to look at our infrastructure and what do we need in this community to make sure that we can support the bandwidth options, eventually the transportation options that are needed to support that kind of activity. Clearly, tourism was the basis of this economy. Clearly, tourism's coming back. I mean, I was down not 2 weeks ago when things opened up, and it was pretty obvious that people wanted to come back. Okay, it was pretty busy, and I think that's only going to continue. But one of the problems is because of the guidelines, you can't handle as many people. They're not going to be spending as much money, and the tourism dollars are not going to be there that have been there in the past. One comment I made, and maybe Zachariah can correct it because I'm sure it's wrong, is that Val Hale or
it's 1 o'clock.
The governor said that Moab is responsible in tourism for about $1.2 billion a year. If that is in fact correct, that's almost 15%, 12 to 15% of the state's GDP for tourism, because tourism is only about $10 billion in the GDP in Utah. This makes Moab very important to get it back on its feet quick, because there's a lot of tax dollars that are not flowing because Moab's down for the count. And so I think there'll be a lot will be received positively for our grant applications to get resources down here and get this community back. But I think it's very important that we start thinking about what's sustainable for the longer term, and how do we make that happen in the short and intermediate term.
I am grateful for, oh gosh, sorry. I'm grateful for all of these comments. I got a little TV table kind of thing working out here, still away from the 11-year-old. So
I'm glad I got you that excited.
I'm so excited. No, I'm appreciative of the comments that I'm hearing, and I'm grateful, Curtis, for your reminder of the plan. And Zachariah, you have definitely laid groundwork for examples of what we can use the funding for. The 200,000, as I understand, is not competitive. So it's what we get. We're going to get it. So it's how we're going to spend it. I did have a question to you. I assumed that certain counties in our state that do not see the sales tax dollars or the property tax dollars that we do in Grand County might be inclined to use that 200,000 to fund their economic development office. And I didn't know if there was any conversation about absorbing that into the county's pocket to pay for the expenses of salaries and such of your office, or if we are in fact going to spend that as bonus money. Can you speak to that?
Thank you.
Great point. That is an eligible use of the funds. I wouldn't recommend that we propose to the state that that's, how we use the bulk of the funds. But, there's no doubt in my mind that a lot of economic development work just requires time and energy on the part of individuals. So that is a conversation for this group to have and for our council representative to bring to the rest of the council.
Yeah, I think
it is a possibility for sure.
Yeah, I think we just need to know from the two of you what we have as a committee to determine how we're going to spend. So are we I'm a junk show today and I apologize. Are we going to be talking about spending this 200,000 toward economic diversification as a group, or will some of that, should we be talking about allocating some of that to your office? And then the other point is that, again, I agree with, sorry, with Brad that the,
Those chickens are really excited about economic development.
oh my gosh, and she's staring at me too. She doesn't normally do this. Anyway, that the summit was an incredible opportunity, especially for bringing down federal and state delegation, and having workshops for the community. That I really do hope that that is something that we can continue, and that the funds can be put toward that. And then the final thing that I want to say is that I'm really grateful to have business community here as part of this committee. And whatever we can do to continue our outreach and communication with the business community as we come up with ideas, whether it's, you know, vetting or you know, just a process by which we can just be, you know, reflect what we, you know, what our what we would like to do with the, before we make a final determination, whatever we determine, I would like to vet it with the business community of Moab.
Okay, can I, like to maybe give a little structure to some of these comments, and so we can, in terms of like, as I'm taking notes, I'm thinking, what am I taking notes on exactly right now? So my thought is that I have everything that Zechariah said that we have done. We all heard that. I think what we can do very easily is let's just kind of go through, and we can add to that right now. And then we can, you know, we'll have a list of different things, and then, you know, Zachariah, you can take a look at that. And then if you want to bucket it or whatever, we can vote on it. We can rank these things. But like, I have a bunch of different extra things that we haven't done. I don't know if this is the forum to say that, but that's one way we could just kind of like, I'll just say something and then just wrap it up. I'll just add to that list, and then just, you know, kind of like end this meeting.
Sure. So I actually went ahead and put my notes in the chat window for everyone's reference. And for those watching on YouTube, you know, these will be in the minutes as well. And that's just to help you, Rob, in real time with your note taking. But I like Rob's idea. I also like the idea of just, you know, let's keep, this is an opportunity for us to just kind of throw some spaghetti on the wall with the group and see what sticks. Not that that's going to be our strategy for economic development, but in terms of idea generation, let's get creative. You know, Rob talked, you know, I shared what we've been doing. You know, I'm not ashamed to say that clearly that's not enough, because we're still talking about economic diversification and development needs. And so, you know, where are we missing the mark?
Yeah.
And what else do we need?
Okay, let me just, if that's okay for the agenda, I'll just go down a few bullet items, and if people want to riff off of them, I think it would take forever to discuss all these different things right now, and it might not have any structure. So I don't know, I'm almost more like we all should let's just throw out, make a larger list, and then we can kind of narrow it down from there. Okay, so a few of my other ideas, you know, one was building off of the gain comment you made, Zachariah. Like, I would be totally interested in giving venture capital money to businesses in town for small equity ownership stakes. You could, you know, Brad, obviously that's his whole background. So I think the idea of the Shark Tank thing is kind of cool, where you could have people present. There could be a pot of money, which could be, a portion could be private, a portion could be, you know, from this grant. And that the grant could be, you know, extra incentive for the business owner, that they would get an even better deal to participate. And then that kind of would come with it some consulting, you know, like taking an ownership stake in a business. So, I mean, I don't know how many opportunities there would be in Moab right now for things like that, you know, but we can certainly do that. I know I'd put in some money. I'm sure a bunch of other people would. And we could, if we had a pot, we could at least start that and see if that's a thing. And I think that'd be someone to try to give a little more like teeth to what happens at Gain. Like you said, it's kind of just networking right now. I think the other thing we haven't mentioned, I think we could have a pot for money to reimburse for like coding school tuition. If someone, I think coding is obviously everyone knows it's, you know, it's a pretty good way to make a living these days, especially remote. I think anybody who does that in Moab, who's interested in that, will stay in Moab. They're not going to like do that to then move to Denver. And a lot of these coding schools are very affordable. There are some things online that are $100, $200, something like that, for different certificates like Treehouse, as opposed to the actual schools that are thousands of dollars. So that's one I think we need to have. And then that also, coding schools and coding in general really work well with co-working spaces. So I'm all for trying to get a co-working space done, and looking at different options for that. I think my initial, what I heard about the Wabi situation was I was surprised at how expensive it was. Not that I have a clue how much they should cost exactly. Well, I mean, I have heard some things, but I think we could maybe have a competitive process for that. One thought I had, I don't know if this would quite count with economic development, but in terms of like economic development and the broad stroke of increasing residents' incomes, I think a revolving loan fund for like ADUs on people's houses would be great to have, and it wouldn't necessarily cost anything. It would just have a revolving amount of money. And the last comment I have is when I did just a quick dirty like look at gross taxable receipts of the, I think it was the Grand County's economic reports, then I divide that by Arch's visitation, you can kind of get like average amount spent per person. And that number I think is about like $220. And that number hasn't really gone up in, I believe, in 15 years or so. So, I mean, one rule of business, right? It's like, you know, we have people coming, right? They're coming here, they're spending a small amount of money relative to other tourist destinations. I mean, that's like a lift ticket at Vail, right? That's their entire trip per person. So I think it makes sense that, you know, there could be an effort saying, or, you know, a committee, or there could be, I don't the policy for this, but there's an opportunity to get them to spend more money while they're here. So like, for instance, like my friend has a company makes ultralight sleeping bags and jackets. They're like $500 a piece. They're really cool. You see one, it makes you want to buy one. He never sells any in town because he sells them online, and he has a little place in his house, but he doesn't have like an office space. But businesses like that, or like a Soul Gear or Eddie Line, you know, businesses that, you know, have high priced items that a tourist, when they're on vacation, they're feeling good, they could open their pocketbooks. So I think that should be a metric that we should track, which is, you know, dollars spent per tourist.
Okay.
Those are my additional things to add to the list that we can, you know, whittle down later.
Yeah, so if I could just take a stab at zooming out and fitting those into sort of the scale that we're talking about today. I would say, you know, there's a whole list of workforce development opportunities for us. You've identified coding. I've had many outfitters and shops talk to me about mechanics training, both for, you know, vehicles and for bicycles. There are other workforce development opportunities. And then, you know, what I'm taking away from your notion of like spend per person, and Elaine probably has an idea of that as well, because I know she's very focused on that from a tourism perspective, is, you know, as a group and over time, what we should be trying to do, and I would say this extends to the city and county councils writ large across a broader set of priority areas, is, you know, what are the indicators that we are trying to optimize? and what's the dashboard of economic indicators that we want to watch. Now, we've been trying to do that from our office in our quarterly reports and annual states of the local economy presentations, but we can get narrower than that. So thank you for those contributions, Rob. Elaine, Curtis, Lacey, Liana, I haven't heard from you all. John, it's been a bit since we've heard from you. I want to make sure that everyone on this group is feeling like they've got space to be heard.
Well, I'll go ahead with a couple of thoughts that I've had, if that's all right.
Please.
Okay, so one thing that I've been thinking is that, with COVID, businesses are struggling in tourism. We all know that we need to diversify for sure. And what are some of the things that Moab has that actually put us in a really good position to move forward with diversification? And that is that the whole world is focused on all the things that Moab is already kind of focused on. That's, solitude, that is, outdoor space, that is also wellness. And I've been thinking like synergy, glow germ, those things, those type of industries, and, Moonflower, we have a lot of space for organic farming and all of that kind of thing. So if we were able to capitalize on all of the things that the world is already focusing on, and then basically that we just need to get that word out. So I agree with Brad about, the remote working. I know that Zachariah, your office has been working on remote work for a long time, that it's been thrown out there. And now we just need to capitalize on that idea and get the word out. So I don't know if you guys if you remember or you have seen it was an REI campaign. I think they called it Opt Outside or something. Anyway, I can send a link for kind of a video that was sent, but they would show people talking like in their offices. So like on a Zoom meeting like this, and it would show their office in the back. And then as it zoomed out, their desk was sitting on top of a mountain or on top of the rocks, and so even a campaign or some way to get the word out might be a good way to use some of the money at least, so that we can just capitalize on what people are already wanting to do. So that was one thought that I had. And then another thought that I've had during this is with businesses, there's kind of a niche for businesses that provide business services. And that's, I would say, website building, marketing, all of that kind of thing. And I know Custom Fit has done some trainings and workshops for that, but we could build on that. Those are also, good jobs for the co-op space. Anything that we can focus on online, or even teaching people, how to do the drop shipping or the, online e-commerce, that kind of thing is, I think, a really good idea to capitalize on right now as well.
Can I just say, Lacey, I think that's actually a fantastic idea for an ad. If you wanted to promote the remote work, that would just be super awesome. Just have a little it'd be like a little Zoom thing or something, and then it just scrolls out. So maybe once Elaine gets fully funded again soon, maybe that could be something that we could discuss. As I don't know if that would count, because you could be like work tourism. That's a thing, right? Yeah.
We did that. The Travel Council did an ad like that many, many years ago, maybe 15 or 18, where they had the desk out on the Red Rock and the computer. Of course, it's a very old computer, and the staff there. So that had already been done years ago, but there'd be a certain, way to update that. But that was something done many, many years ago here. And trying to entice people to come here.
I'll put a link in the chat with the video I'm thinking of too.
I think that what should go on the list are reaching out, and I said that in the chat, to minority companies around the country that we could lure here because we're going to give them support, grant funding, whatever it might be. That would help in so many ways. How can we reach out to those companies that are looking to grow, minority companies, not have the funding, but if we can get them here, they may be able to expand and into categories that we normally wouldn't even think of. But I think that needs to be really looked at in a way that we can make that part of what we're requesting and why we're requesting this money from the state if we have to justify, the categories that we're looking at. But we need to do that, and that needs to be part of everything we do for diversification going forward.
So I guess, Emily?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, John, you and I were talking a year ago, and we were talking about what it would take to relocate your team to Moab. And you made a really good point. Lots of people looking at relocating to Moab have needs. And one of them is a Costco or a place to buy underwear. In conversations that I've had with people, when I say, awesome, why, like, I love your business, they say this, oh, I love Moab. And I say, well, I love your business. Why don't you bring it to Moab? And they're like, oh, there's no way, because, and then they'll give me their list of why businesses, why employees just don't want to live in Moab. And we can do ads, and that's really fun and exciting. But we also need to take a hard look at what our community is lacking, and why people don't want to relocate here. And I think that, I don't know if that's something that this group wants to talk about, but I mean, we're Moab sitting here in this Zoom meeting, and it's important for us to start being honest about what we do and do not have to offer people that are looking to relocate. I've been in conversation, Rob, just so you know, with a guy who runs a coding school in Salt Lake. And we've been talking about doing, in fact, at the at some summit conference that you did, Zachariah, at the Hoodoo, with the pitch event. We got going an idea of doing a co-working space where it would be similar to Impact Hub in Salt Lake. The top floor of Impact Hub is V School. Mo Reeder's the leader of the V School, and he and I are talking about what it would take to get him to open a branch here. And so, there could be conversation to incentivize that, because that's already happening, and a platform for something like that would be awesome. But when we talk about, again, people coming to Moab, there are things that we don't have. We've got a school district with one option for secondary education. We've got, we're remote in terms of healthcare. So, some people that are, that receive more consistent visits with a doctor, like this isn't they're going to be their place. There's just I don't know, there's like a list of stuff we don't have that maybe this group can look at too.
Well, I think that's important. And I think if you could, since you've been sort of the point of the spear, you and Zachariah, could make a list of those things. It goes back to infrastructure, and it also goes back to really targeting. I mean, this is blocking and tackling to get people to come here. This isn't big advertising campaigns and saying things that we're not, okay? This is plus pressing the flesh and talking about what we can do as opposed to and what we can't do, and targeting the right kind of people. But I think that there is an opportunity to be able to do some of that. But I think it's very important. Infrastructure is going to be a big deal. If you guys can make a list, maybe there's ways we can approach those infrastructure items. Maybe this is the kind of money we can get from other sources to try to fix those infrastructure items. One of the things, Zachariah, I was going to mention to you, I sit on the Mountain Lands Revolving Loan Fund, and Mountain Lands has gotten 2 rounds of money from CDBG for grants. And we've given out, the first round was $500,000, and we gave out 86 $5,000 grants to businesses in Wasatch and Summit counties, what it was geared to. Is there other monies that are out there because of this COVID deal, because that's where it came from, that you can chase and the city can chase to get more money to help in some of these infrastructure issues?
Great question. Just with the time that we have today, what I'll say is, in future meetings, let's keep an eye on leveraging potential. So, there's often not enough money in any one grant program to do what you need. That's why we also want to avoid whittling this down by spreading out our priorities too much. But, to the degree that we can leverage different funding streams, the better. We've got just about 5 minutes left. I haven't heard from Liana. Kelly's put a couple things in the chat window. Elaine, I'd love to hear more from you. We're not going to be able to hear from everyone adequately today. So, Liana, if you want to add anything, and then if I can just keep everyone's attention for a few more minutes so that we can try to schedule a follow-up meeting.
Yeah, I would like to add that something that we have here that isn't in a lot of other rural towns is USU, right? And I know that in looking at what Kelly's been talking about and listening to what you guys have been mentioning, there's a lot of, Emily mentioned something about bookkeeping and web development, all that kind of stuff. And as we're now a technical college and we have all these kinds of certifications. And so one of the resources that we have here is, while the infrastructure may not be so great yet, in the shorter term, we have a lot of people here that need jobs that Kelly knows about, right? And so there's something to leverage, that we can get folks trained. We can start working with businesses maybe to do tuition assistance programs where they have promotions that are tied to degrees that they get. Something that we found in other regional campuses across the state is that, not even in regional campuses, let's say school districts across the state. So when up in the Uinta Basin, for example, they tried $10,000 signing bonuses for teachers, right? And the teachers would come, and as soon as that requirement was done, they were out of there, right? So living in these places takes a special kind of person. And so if we take this attitude of trying to grow our own, I think at least in the short term, I think that that's going to be really helpful. Take the folks that are here, who want to be here and like being here, and help get them trained up. So I see USU as being, I don't think we're really a driver of the economy, but what we can certainly do is what we decide that we want to do. USU can help train, help train with certifications, help working with Kelly with the workforce. We can bring in our expertise that we have with the university. So for example, we have now a new entrepreneurship minor. And so that's something that you don't have to be part of the Huntsman School of Business. Any student can get this minor. And so that could be somehow tied in with entrepreneurial things. I've been in, I think Zachariah, we were talking about bringing in Mike Lauser, who's the the entrepreneur school or program guy. He wants to come. He's really excited about coming down and talking about how we can tie some of these things, like that pitch piece might be part of something that we could be doing with students. Could be tied, we could be, maybe some funds could go to scholarship for students to come and get, be trained for some jobs, things like that. So I want you to I want to think about how USU can help support some of these ideas and get folks trained. We're hearing a lot about training, and so that's something that we can do to help.
Great, thank you. It's 1:27 right now. In the last few minutes that we have scheduled for today, can we try to identify a week, and then a day, and then a time to meet again? I will note that our Economic Resilience Task Force group has been meeting weekly on Wednesdays at this time at 12 p.m. So for me, that's the easiest time to keep blocked off. And over time, again, I see those groups kind of melding and us having a lot of ex officio members. How do Wednesdays at 12 p.m. sound for folks in general?
that works fine for me. I think we need to have probably a couple of meetings in the near future and then
Yeah.
spread them out because you've got a lot on your plate that needs to get done.
Yeah, I'm wondering if folks are willing to meet next Wednesday at the same time and we continue this discussion. I've got a lot of notes from today, and what I'd like to do is get those out to you as quickly as possible with some suggestions for how we pick up next week and keep this momentum going. I know I said 6 to 8 meetings a year. We got to get to the point where we've got enough momentum to carry us through with larger breaks in between the meetings. So I promise these are not meetings just for the sake of meetings. I'm not going to schedule these unless it feels like we really need them and there's a clear goal in mind. But
So I like that, Curtis, you asked us to review that plan. I think that's important, especially with the lens of COVID, like you were saying, Sheik. I would like the answer from the county, how much, we should be considering as a group allocating the 20,000 or the 200,000 to just general operations of the office, or if we're truly going to have that 200,000 as a full fund, plus whatever else we might apply for as a group. And then Zachariah, I would just ask you before the next meeting to please put a wish list together of what you think. I mean, you've been running the office, you've been applying for these various funds that are now collated into this fund. So if we're looking forward into this next year, what's your wish list of how to spend the money so that we can say, no way, or that looks really good, and save us a lot of conversation about this and that. And I think that's what I would like to see. And then we can rip it apart, or we can say, that's a really good comprehensive list for this year.
I agree, Emily. Zachariah, I will not be able to attend Tuesday, Wednesday. I'm out next week, but if you can send it ahead of time, I can provide you all my written comments and I'll send it around to the whole group.
Absolutely.
I've got a conflict as well, but I'll see if that's going to make. But send it out and I'll give you feedback.
Okay. Does the rest of the group want to go ahead and schedule for next Wednesday at noon then?
That works for me, Zachariah.
Okay.
Zachariah, and then just like in terms of timeline of stuff, it sounds like, well, do we have to put one application? Can we put 2 applications in terms of like for pot A and then pot B, or does it have to be just one thing?
The pot B money, or that application, is not actually open yet. So we're focusing strictly on the 200,000 right now.
Well, is it guaranteed, or is
Yes.
required? So
the
why
200,000 is pretty much guaranteed.
So why don't you just put that in now? And then we'll discuss. And then once we get the money, we can.
How about after the next meeting I do that? That's still before the 19th. But I'd like for the group to weigh in on that. I think it's actually I think it's pretty important that this group at least bless at a high level what we put in. That's the whole point of this group.
Yeah, I just meant like, it sounds like
we're not going to miss out on that 200,000, but I think, so waiting a week is not problematic, but
yeah, I just meant that, I'd rather spend more time debating how we're going to spend the money, once we have the money. I think if we have,
sure.
It sounds like it's pretty malleable. We don't have to be that specific. That's all I was saying, but
yeah.
Then we
well, let's try to get just one more level of specificity. And then we'll get it submitted.
My chicken just wants to say bye to everybody.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing us all together and all of your work.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
For those that didn't speak as much today as others, just a heads up that I'll be calling you at the outset of next meeting.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Zachariah, send me what you have.